I'm the parent of a child with autism, in addition to being Director of State Government Affairs for Autism Speaks. I always got to start my presentation with a picture, a reminder of my inspiration for why I do what I do with my kids. Kate is now a junior in high school, which terrifies me. She's 16. She was diagnosed with autism at 2.5. And my son Sam on the right is an 8th grader. Just very quickly, I wanted to review, give you some idea of what my goals are for the next 30 minutes. The first is to gain a basic understanding of health insurance plan types, and more importantly, why you have to know what type of health insurance plan you have, and we'll talk about how you can sort that out. And we're also, obviously, the focus of the discussion is going to be how you can advocate for meaningful coverage in self-funded health benefit plans. I like to think of in just kind of big portions of that pie. Generally, about 30% of the plans are going to be fully insured or fully insured or state regulated is another way to put that. 30% are self-funded and therefore not subject to state law, and another 30% are covered under Medicaid. Obviously, those vary from state to state. But the importance of knowing which portion of the pie your health insurance plan lies in is because it determines the authority to change the benefit design. For example, can you change the benefits in your plan by state law, by federal law, by state administrative action, or can your employer do it? The answer is yes, depending on which type of insurance plan you have. It also changed, therefore, how you advocate. If you live in a state who hasn't passed a state mandate yet, and you're covered by a fully insured plan, going to your employer to ask them to add the benefit isn't going to do any good. Your employer has no say in what type of benefits are in your plan if it is a fully insured plan. However, if you have a self-funded health benefit plan like we're talking about tonight, going to your employer is the exact right thing to do, because if you can make a compelling case for your employer to add a benefit, whether it be ABA or whatever the benefit you need for your child, if you can make a compelling case and they agree that it's beneficial, and then they go to the HR department and say, get this done, and they get it done. It also determines with whom you file a complaint. If you feel that you should be entitled to a particular benefit under your health insurance plan, but they're not implementing that benefit correctly, if you have a fully insured plan, you would file that complaint with the State Department of Insurance. However, if you have a self-funded health benefit plan, and I'm going to clarify what those terms mean in just a minute. But if you have a self-funded health benefit plan, going to your State Department of Insurance probably isn't going to help much because they have no jurisdiction over your plan because it is federally regulated. A little bit more about these two types of plan. As I mentioned, a self-funded health benefit plan is federally regulated. It's regulated under a federal law called ERISA, which John referred to. And ERISA establishes baseline benefits that each self-funded health benefit plan must provide. Currently, that baseline does not include coverage for applied behavior analysis. Now, because this is federally regulated, this is a federal law advocating at the state level to add ABA to that baseline of coverage isn't going to help us. We have to advocate at a federal level. I work in state government affairs in all 50 states. I live in Kansas City, but I work at the state level. But we do have a federal team based in DC, and an amendment to ERISA law to include coverage for ABA so that every self-funded health benefit plan in the country would have to cover applied behavior analysis is on our agenda. I don't expect that to happen soon, but it is clearly on our agenda, something we've been pushing for years. A fully insured plan, however, is state regulated, and John showed you the map of our 42 states that require coverage for the treatment of autism, including applied behavior analysis, in at least some of the fully insured markets. Now, it's important to remember that state laws can choose to exempt some uh, fully insured markets. For example, here in Utah, they carved out the small group market primarily because of concerns about cost. Um, we won't get into too much of that tonight, but now that there are 42 states that have passed these laws, we have a growing body of claims data that demonstrates that the costs are really negligible. On average, what we're looking at is less than 50 cents per member per month. So basically what that means is you are asking your coworkers to buy you a can of Coke once a month to make sure that your kid gets appropriate medical treatment. And I don't know too many coworkers that would object to that. All right, so there's our famous green state map. If you've ever visited our website, you've seen that. And basically what that means is that in that state, coverage for applied behavior analysis is available in at least some of the fully insured markets. But as we're referring to here, not all plan types can be impacted by state law. So even when we have uh, a map that is fully green, even if we had laws in those states that applied to every fully insured plan in that state, didn't carve out any markets, we would still only have about 30% of the population in the country covered by state law because of the way that they're regulated. And a big chunk of the remainder of that pie are the self-funded plans that we're going to talk about tonight. So I've been throwing out these terms for the past 10 minutes, fully insured versus self-funded. So what the heck does that mean? It's important to know this because the very first thing that needs to be answered before I can answer your question is it fully insured or is it self-funded? The distinguishing feature between those two types of plans are ultimately who is the entity that is assuming the financial risk to pay the employee's claims. So this is one of my favorite graphics that illustrates a typical fully insured plan. And I'm sure that you're familiar with this scenario. You're the consumer or the employee, and you pay your monthly premiums to your employer. Your employer frequently will match premium. But your employer, they're not the ones paying your health insurance. They're not the ones paying your claims. What the employer has done is to shop around for a group health insurance contract, and they purchased a group health insurance contract to offer to their employees. It is in the case of fully insured plans, the health insurer that is the one assuming the financial risk to pay your claims. When I get sick with cancer and have a $200,000 medical bill, it's not me that pays $200,000. It's not my employer that pays $200,000. It's the insurance company that pays $200,000. Now, please don't feel sorry for them. They've got, they're making plenty of profit, believe me. We've talked a little bit tonight about individual plans as well. They are also fully insured plans. The only difference in this scenario is that we've taken the employer out of the equation. The consumer simply purchases a health insurance plan directly from the health insurance company. But again, it's not the individual, it's not the consumer that's taking the financial risk to pay my $200,000 worth of chemotherapy. It is the health insurance company. So this contrasts, though, to a self-funded health benefit plan. Now, in the case we call self-funded health benefit plans, in this case, self refers to the employer, not the individual. It refers to the employer. From the consumer's standpoint, I don't really see a difference for the most part, because I'm still paying my monthly premiums. They're taking it, my employer's taking that out of my paycheck every month. But in this case, the employer is the one taking the financial risk. They have a pool of money. Part of that is contributed by the monthly premiums that they're collecting. Um, and out of that pool of money, they are paying your medical claims. Now, because of that, it's typically large companies. Like when I hear somebody works for a company that has 1,200 employees, they're probably going to be self-funded. Now, not always, but typically companies that have greater than 200 employees are more likely to be self-funded than a smaller company because they've got more money to play around with and can afford to have that pool of money to pay medical claims. Where it gets a little confusing, however, is that you know those companies are not necessarily in the business of administering health insurance. They're in the business of making widgets or whatever it is that they do. So because of that inexperience, they will typically hire a third-party administrator or a TPA to help them to administer the claims, to collect the premiums, to pay the health insurance claim, to pay the medical bills to the provider. In most cases, that third-party administrator happens to be a health insurance company. And it may happen to be the same health insurance company that provides a fully insured plan to the company across the street. Where it gets confusing is that, say, for example, the health insurance company that we're talking about is Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now, I'm not necessarily a fan of Blue Cross Blue Shield. It just happens to be the picture that I could download off the internet. But from the consumer standpoint, the health insurance card that is issued to me on the left here is an example of a health insurance card from Blue Cross uh, that's providing a fully insured plan. On the right is an employee is from a company that provides a self-funded health benefit plan and uses Blue Cross Blue Shield as their third-party administrator. The cards look identical. So, when Kate was diagnosed at 2.5, the most I knew about health insurance was that I paid my premiums every month. When I got sick, they took care of it, and that was about it. That clearly changed when she got the diagnosis of autism and she was prescribed ABA, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and everything was denied. And I don't think that's unusual, but unfortunately, autism parents need to be a little bit more savvy when it comes to health insurance. So how can you figure this out? Um, some states, not Utah, I know New Jersey does, some states, because of this confusion, require health insurance companies to specifically state on the card whether or not it is self-funded or fully insured. But since we don't live in New Jersey, um, you have to take other investigate this a little bit further. When you got your health insurance plan, you should have received what's referred to as a summary plan description, probably about a 30 or 40-page document that talks about your copays and all the benefits and exclusions. And in there should be some language that clarifies whether your plan is self-funded or fully insured. Now, those documents are supposed to be, by law, written at a fifth grade level. I've got a couple degrees, and I can guarantee you that they're probably not written at a fifth grade level. And you're probably going to have to wind up calling your human resources department. And if you get a hold of the right person at the human resources department, they should be able to answer that question. If all else fails and nobody can answer your question, all self-funded health benefit plans have to file with the U.S. Department of Labor. So you could call the U.S. Department of Labor, say, hey, I work for company ABC. Is this a self-funded health benefit plan? And they should be able to tell you. Acknowledging that we're not all health insurance experts, and this is a difficult question to answer if we're not familiar with it, we put together a couple years ago an online application that helps you sort through this. And essentially it provides a list of 5 or 6 questions that when answered and inputted into the application, it'll spit out, okay, I've got a fully insured plan, I live in Utah, I should be entitled to coverage for applied behavior analysis under my particular plan. Or No, you work for a self-funded health benefit plan, um, and then it would refer you to some of the tools that we're going to talk about how to advocate for the addition of a meaningful benefit. It allows you to print the questions out ahead of time because you're probably not going to know the answers to the questions as you're doing it. So print them out, call your HR department, ask those questions, scribble down the answers, go back into the application, and plug in the answers, and it should provide a meaningful result for you. So if ultimately you determine that you are covered by a self-funded health benefit plan and your plan does not currently provide coverage for applied behavior analysis, what can you do? I mentioned earlier that there is no federal law that requires self-funded health benefit plans to provide this coverage. However, they are not precluded from adding that coverage if they choose to do so. And why do you think that is? Well, think back to the difference between a fully insured plan and a self-funded health benefit plan. Who's paying for it in a self-funded health benefit plan? Your employer is the one paying for it. So if you can convince him or her that this is a benefit that would be meaningful to their employees, and you can show them claims data, which we're happy to provide to you, that it's not going to break the bank, they say add it, and it has to be added. Even if their third-party administrator happens to be a health insurance company, which historically would say, no, we don't cover this. We feel that ABA is experimental, even though there's 40 years of evidence to refute that statement. Even if their opinion is that it shouldn't be covered, if your employer says, I want it covered, they got to cover it. And as John mentioned earlier, probably about 10 years ago, before the state autism insurance reform movement started, the number or the percentage of self-funded health benefit plans that provided coverage for ABA was probably in the single digits. But now, and we get this data from an annual report that's generated by Mercer, which looks at they provide a questionnaire of large companies, details of the types of benefits that they're providing. In 2014, which is our most recent report, 37% of large companies over 200, and typically, as I mentioned, the majority of those plans are going to be self-funded, provide coverage for applied behavior analysis. And I think that's largely due to the state autism insurance reform movement. As we get more and more states covered, these self-funded health benefit plans are oftentimes compelled to add a similar benefit in order to remain competitive in the market. But we do have to go company by company at this point to make the case. Adobe did it without any help from anybody at Autism Speaks, as far as I know it. They did it on their own. There might have been a parent in the company, that approached them about that. But we do have to go company by company. And I would say if we can get a meeting to make the case, I would say we're probably about 70+% successful in getting them to add a benefit. I would have never guessed that before I started doing this, but as I mentioned, I'm in state government affairs, so we spend a lot of our time in state legislatures. But now that we've got 42 states passed, and we're spending time less in state legislatures and more on this effort, helping parents, and we are more than happy to accompany parents in these meetings to share some of the information that's available. But you're not going to get it if you don't ask for it. And that's what really surprised me, is that very rarely has a company made a conscious decision not to provide coverage for kids with autism or not to provide coverage for ABA. It's simply the fact that nobody has ever approached them that say, hey, this is going to help my kid. This is going to help several other kids in the company. So we were frequently getting calls from or emails from parents who happen to live in a state where we passed a mandate, and then they figure out, hey, great, but it didn't help me because I have a self-funded plan. So what can you do to help me? We were getting that call so frequently that we put together a toolkit. This is available free online at the link here. It's our self-funded employer toolkit. You can download that. After you download that and go through that information, I'm going to go through here a little bit about all the components of that toolkit. But the first thing is to request a meeting. So who do you request that meeting of? We used to say, call your HR department and get a meeting. But if you didn't get a meeting with the right person in HR, sometimes we were finding that we had to go through 3 or 4 meetings to ultimately find out, hey, 5 minutes, okay. HR isn't responsible for this. We happen to have what's referred to as a health benefits committee. So it's like a committee of 10 or 12 people that sit around a table once a year. They determine which benefits are going to be added in the next open enrollment period. So find out if they do have that type of benefits committee. But more importantly, if you have a connection, somebody in the executive chain, happen to know the CEO, that would be the meeting. Because if the CEO decides that this is an appropriate benefit and consistent with their mission statement, then I think you're golden. In the toolkit, we have sample letters to kind of help you with that introductory ask that you're free to copy and paste. We also have a PowerPoint presentation in there that you're welcome to download and present to your employers. And it's got very basic stuff in there, again, because very rarely they are making the conscious decision not to provide coverage. They just don't know anything about autism. So it's got very basic stuff in there. What is autism? How is it treated? What is ABA? Some of the research behind the efficacy of ABA, and importantly for the employer, how much is it going to cost? Because they're the ones paying for it. They want to know how much it's going to cost. Like I mentioned, we've got now a growing body of claims data that we're happy to share. It also has employer testimonials from other companies that have done this before, and they can speak to things like how it's helped their employees. They can speak to the cost. We do have specific samples of claims data from self-funded health benefit plans. Most of our data has come from the state mandates that have passed. If you can get a meeting, it's important to find out how much time you're going to have. If you've only got 10 minutes versus 30 minutes, it's going to change how you prepare for that meeting. Also ask who's going to be there, how many people are going to be there from the company, and ideally their names and titles. If I accompany a family of these, I like to do a little bit of online sleuthing about these people, so I kind of have some idea who I'm talking to. I mentioned earlier the mission statement. If you can find that, take a look at it. Because most large companies have a mission statement, and they may say something to the effect that we are dedicated to employee quality of life, or something else that would be very consistent with what our ask is. As an autism parent, I can guarantee you that if I had had adequate coverage for Kate's treatments when we were going through this, trying to figure this out at the time my son hits the ground, my quality of life would have been significantly improved, not stressing about that. And I would have been a more productive employee, frankly. I was lucky. I'm actually a veterinarian by trade. So does that make you feel better about me telling you about insurance because I'm a veterinarian? If I can't answer your questions, ask me about your dog later and I can help you. But no, I mean, it wasn't until Kate was diagnosed, when she was diagnosed, I should say, I'm pretty certain that if I weren't also a partner in this practice, that my job would have been at risk, because my productivity was clearly suffering because of what was going on at home. Employers probably also going to want to know what their competitors are doing. I mentioned that Mercer report. It has in there also, it's not only percentages of self-funded companies that do it, but it's broken down by region, and it's broken down by industry, which can be helpful in the decision-making process. A couple questions that I frequently get asked are, should I attend alone or with other families? I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer to this question, other than to say, I mentioned earlier, find out how many people are going to be representing the company. Have at least two or three less people on the other side of the table. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but autism, particularly autism moms, can be a little scary. And if you and if you go in with a gang of autism moms and there's like two or three people on the other side of the table, they're probably going to be scared and not really receptive to you. So, and then the other question is, should I bring my affected child? And I was always kind of the mindset that no, I don't think you should because, you know, a this is a confusing topic. This is an emotional topic. You're asking your company to pay for something for you, but also other employees. Um, and you may only have 15 minutes to make your case. And, your affected child probably is going to be a bit of a distraction in that room, and you might lose your opportunity to make your case if the employer is distracted. Having said that, I'll share a quick story. I was at a meeting with a family who worked for a municipality in Indiana, and I flew out there on a freezing cold day and met with this family and their employers. And a very blue collar family, mom and dad were both working. They, were lucky that they could get off work to be there. The child was out of school and they couldn't get childcare for their pretty severely affected teenage daughter. And they said, "Can I bring her?" I'm like, "Absolutely, bring her." Um, and my typical agenda for these meetings are that I have the parents present their personal story because that's really the most compelling thing that can be shared during these meetings. You know, how having a child with autism has impacted my life, how it's impacted my family's quality of life, how having meaningful coverage could improve my quality of life. And then I launch into the details about what's ABA, the efficacy behind it, blah, 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 the costs. Um, in this meeting, there was three people from the company on the other side of the table. It was me, the mom, the dad, and the young lady. Um, like I said, she was pretty severely affected. She was nonverbal. She was stimming the entire time, vocalizing the entire time. The parents are sharing, this clearly heartbreaking story. Before it was my turn, two of the three people on the other side of the table were in tears and basically said, "Okay, we're going to do this. You don't have to go on." So it can be very effective in some cases. So I've changed my mind about that. What if they say no? And first of all, it's very unlikely you're going to get an answer one way or the other at this meeting. So be prepared for that. They need to take this back to other members of the company and make this before they make this decision. If they say no, obviously it's going to be upsetting, but don't lose your cool. First of all, you don't want to lose your job as well as your cool, but you don't necessarily know the company's financials. They might not necessarily be in a position to financially afford this, even though we've shared data that shows, 50 cents per member per month, you know, very cost effective. Um, they simply might not be in a position to do it, but come back next year. They might be in a better position. And I have had that experience. I helped the family at a hospital association in Ohio. They couldn't do it the first year, but they had just come out of bankruptcy. Probably bad time for us to go ask this question. But then the next year we went back and they added the benefit. So what if they say yes? Obviously we're going to party. Please let us know. Shoot me a quick email. We try to keep a list of companies that we have documented have added a benefit. If possible, get a copy of the plan and shoot it to me. We've made a mistake a couple times adding a company to our list and shared it and found out that we were wrong. So we really like to have confirmation before we add it to our list. But having that list is important again because like Adobe, has added the benefit. We verified that. So when we go to speak to another tech company, we can say, "Hey, Adobe did it, Google did it, Microsoft did it." So that can be very helpful to have that information. Um, we can also help them to design the benefit. In some cases, they say, "Sure, great, you've made a compelling case. I agree. We should do this. Now what?" We can help them with that, and we can direct them to people that can help them with that. If they want some press about this, we're more than happy to provide some press about that. We can feature them on our website as a company of the week. We can put out press releases. Not all companies want that, but if they do, we're happy to help with that. Finally, we've already talked about this, but are there advocacy efforts to amend ERISA? Yes, because if we got that done, we could stop this company by company approach and just get it done in one fell swoop. Finally, I'm going to put in a quick plug for our annual Autism Law Summit. This is our 10th anniversary. This year it's going to be held in Mobile, Alabama, November 6th, 7th, and 8th. So it's 3 days of really deep dive into advocacy related to health insurance coverage primarily. All types of health insurance coverage, implementation issues. What if, we've got coverage here, but our insurance company continues to jack us around? What do I do? There are, advocates from across the country that attend this. Last year we had 200 people. Really great event. We have been focused for the past decade in our government affairs department primarily on insurance. I think because of that, we've been pretty successful. We, however, acknowledge that there are more issues that the autism community is faced with other than health insurance. Our kids with autism become adults with autism. We deal with education issues. We deal with transition to adulthood. We deal with employment. We deal with, housing. We recognize that, but we haven't been able to do anything about it as aggressively as we have done with insurance until recently. So we're making some progress towards that. We're going to be talking about those issues. We would love to get the community's input on those issues to help guide the next decade of our policy directives. So if you're interested, we'd love to see you.